Wait a second here. So Chelsea took care of you. She did.
It's our strangest feeling, feeling this way for you. There's something in the way you move, something in the way you move. You want to
Technology. Got some David Camacho.
You guys how you doing tonight? What's up, David? Hey, thanks for coming tonight. My name is David Camacho, I'm the district leader here in this office. And today we're just going to share with you some information. We're going to have 3 guest speakers that are going to explain to you a problem that's happening in the world, actually, in America, right? First speaker, Robin Sears, she's going to talk about this problem. She's going to share with you how you can either, if you're a client, a family member, or a friend just here to support us, or see, or in a way of just seeing and supporting our cause. Wade's causing us to come and talk to you about the solution to this problem, actually a part of the solution, and then Brett's going to close it with the problem and the solution together, and how it can be an opportunity for you and your life and your business. So, without any further ado, just let me bring out Robin Sears.
So the big joke around here, for many of you, is I was a technology lawyer and I can't figure out technology. I only know how to advise on it. I don't actually know how to use it. There we go, Robin Sears, that's me. Well, hello everybody. How are you? Good. So David sort of briefly touched on what tonight's about, and I want to expound on that a little bit. Tonight is our community meeting night, and we call it our Allies, Advocates, and Associates. And the reason we call it that is because everybody in the room is here for a different reason. Michael, I paid. We'll take care of that later. Just kidding. Mark's like, wait, you paid him and not me? What is up with this? So, you know, there are some folks in the room, you know, who David said are aware of this problem that we're going to talk about. They're aware of the solution, and they heard it, they learned about it, and they raised their hand and said, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of the solution directly. And there are those folks in the room. There are other folks in the room who said, I get this, and I really want to support you in it. And so we've got a bunch of folks here who are supporting other people in the room. And then there's a group of people that we said, hey, would you mind coming and listening to us? I'm like, well, thanks for doing that. Because we're a grassroots movement. We don't advertise on TV. You won't see a big like page on Facebook. We are a movement that is growing word of mouth by one person to one person to one person. And that only happens in the conversations we have directly or in the presentation and open house that we do tonight. And so we thank you for being here, whether you're here because you're actively involved in the movement already, you're here because you're already a supporter of the movement, or you're here for the first time because it allows our movement to move a little bit forward. So what is this movement all about? I'm about to break down something. I thought it was earth-shattering. It's so earth-shattering that it's gone. Hey, Sears? Yeah, you bring it back up. So here's what's happening in the world. The world is a blank slate, clearly. Now here's what we're going to talk about. At the top of this world that is a blank slate are wealthy people. Right? This is not surprising. Wealthy people have access to lots of things. They have access to education opportunities. They have access to lots of good financial advice. They have access to something we call financial freedom. And financial freedom we define as having the time and the money to do what you want, when you want, with who you want to do it. And I always say I won't do it. But don't we all sort of know people who have a whole lot of time on their hands but don't actually make any money? Right? We know those folks. And we all know potentially people who work all the time and may have some money, but they actually have no time to enjoy it. See, neither of those are what I call financial freedom. Financial freedom is only when you actually achieve both. The time and the money. The money to do whatever you want, when you want to do it, with who you want to do it. That's what we're all trying to achieve in life, right? At the end of the day. And that's what's happening at the top. Now, something really interesting we observed is actually happening at the bottom. And that is that in this great country, there are a group of people who sort of are the least fortunate in our country. And we've decided as a community that we're going to support that group of people. And so there's hundreds of thousands of nonprofit programs, government programs, churches, temples that are available for folks on a need basis to provide them with assistance, free preschool, grants for college, financial advice. Hundreds of thousands of people wake up every day and say, I want to have an impact on this world, and I'm going to do it by supporting that group of people. So based on what I just said, there's a big group of people at the top, and a lot of us get up every day in order to take their money because they can pay us to do anything. And there's a big group of people at the bottom that a lot of people wake up in order to help and support, and that has left a very large void in the middle, kind of like the one up here. And it's funny because we laugh, but this is actually more representative of the void than when we have the slide up. Because when we have the slide up, the void looks about that big. Well, I might be Michael because it's like about that big. But when we look at this screen, empty, we actually see the vastness of the void that exists. And that's what we're talking about. Because this void includes a family that makes $40,000 a year, right? One income, a little apartment in Burbank, maybe a little Honda, living paycheck to paycheck. And it includes a family up there making $350,000, dual income, living in a 6,000 square foot house in Stevenson Ranch with a Mercedes and a Lexus. Because both those families are actually living paycheck to paycheck. And both those families want to be able to give to their children. Both those families want financial freedom, and they don't have access to it. And the reason that they don't have access to it is because no one's actually interested in all of us having access. It's actually quite logical. We buy the goods and services that are manufactured by the people at the top, and we pay the taxes to support the programs that are at the bottom. So who would ever want it to change? Right? People at the top have no interest. They're like, oh no, we're booked. It's all full here. Sorry, you can get a reservation in 5 years, right? The people at the bottom are like, no, we're way overcrowded, thank you. And so that really leaves us with no one. Who do we turn to? Right? Do any of us actually think that the banks or the insurance companies or corporate America are here to save us? Or even the government for that matter? Doesn't matter what the government does, we pay in taxes. No matter what the government does, they can't help this large space. And it affects us each differently based on where we are. Right? I mean, this is not a huge surprise to you. right? You didn't come here tonight and say, oh my God, we actually have classes in this country, right? Like you've never heard this before. This is not shocking. This is not, you know, late night news here. But what's interesting is thinking about how it actually impacts you personally, right? There are folks in the room, potentially, who are what we call part of the baby boomer generation. That was part of my mom's generation. And the thing that's happening with them, which is interesting, is that they want to retire and they can't. And Janice says, and I'm on my 20th career and I'm going for it, right? Which is so inspiring, and yet we want it to be a choice and not a have to, right? And so it's a crisis because there's not a lot of time, right? And the truth is Michael doesn't want his grandma to have to work any more than she wants to. And then there's a group that we call the Gen X, Gen Y group, and that's my generation, and there are a bunch of us in the room, and we've got little kids. Some of us have little kids and big kids, right? We're trying to make ends meet. We're trying to prepare them for college. And my generation is taking more loans out of the money they've saved than any generation before. So we're stuck where we are. And the real problem isn't just that we're stuck. We don't actually know we're stuck. And the group of people who know it the least are the millennials. And y'all are my favorite. We got a couple of you here. And what's so fun about the millennials is you guys are like the most excited generation we've had. The most caring, do-good service providers we've seen. And yet, you're walking into a world where tuition is higher than we've ever seen it. Where loans are outrageous and actually difficult to get. And where the job market sucks, for lack of a better term. It's not your fault. It simply is what it is. And so there are other people in this room who've heard me say, I call y'all the screwed generation. And I've had a lot of people get really annoyed with me about that. But it's not that as a generation you're screwed for life. It's that the environment, the structure that is set up will screw you over if you don't do something different. And we can turn it into a success. That's what tonight's about. Tonight's about acknowledging the way the system is set up, acknowledging that no one is going to change it except for us, and saying, how could our life be different if it was different? What would happen if we woke up tomorrow and we didn't have any college loans? What would happen if we woke up tomorrow and we knew that if we came out of college and we wanted to start a business, someone would write us a check for $500,000? How would your life be different? How would your life be different if you knew exactly the amount that you needed to retire, the date that you wanted to retire, and could do it on that date? What peace of mind would we have? How would we walk different? How would we think different? That's what tonight's about. And so I'm going to ask you, since we've all agreed that there's this problem, to take the next half hour, 10 hours, just kidding, just half hour, and really listen to the solution. Because the only way that we can make the difference that we're thinking about right now is if we just know how. See, our job, my responsibility, the way that I sleep at night, is to know that you're sitting here to get the information. What you decide to do with it, it's just up to you. So thank you for being here tonight. And with that, I'm going to invite up the great Wade Skalski to share the first part of our solution.
So it's funny. So we don't have slides, so I may go for like 25 or 45 minutes. But no, Robin did a great job of identifying a problem, right? And this problem actually has existed for a really long time, okay? Talking about the problem of access. And what we're trying to do as a group of people is not settle for that problem, because that's how we end up in a situation where we're not ready to retire, right? So what's the solution if we don't want to settle for the status quo as it is, right? If we want to live a different life where we're not in the baby boomers plight or the Gen X or the millennials plight, what do? Well, we came up with a solution as well. Let's look at what the wealthy do with their money, right? Because it's not magic that they have their money. There's this misnomer that the wealthy inherit their money, but actually 8 out of 10 of millionaires are first generation. So that means that the wealthy think about their money differently. And what we did is we identified 4 principles that run through pretty much how the wealthy think and treat their money, all right? So number 1, what the wealthy do is they lock in advances. What this means is that if you work and you build a business or you go to college, right, you want to make sure that your children don't have to redo all the work that you did, right? So they make sure that generations aren't repeating the work, right? That's number 1. The second thing they do is they establish habits. They understand that wealth takes time to build, right? And once they build that wealth, they protect it. That's the locking in advances. But as they're building that wealth, establishing that habits, they want to make sure that they treat their money in the right way over time. The third thing they do is they leverage experts, all right? They don't do their own taxes, okay? Fairly certain we're in a presidential race, and not to get into whoever's politics you're on, but I guarantee you all of the presidential candidates that are releasing their taxes, none of them did it themselves, right? They hire experts, all right? But for me, I knew nothing about cars. So yes, I could go on a YouTube video and be like, here's how you change oil, right? I'm not really good at it. I'm not super skilled at it, and I would like my car to work after I do it, right? So I get a mechanic to fix my car, right? Or she even change the oil. The wealthy understand this, so they leverage experts. And the third thing they do is they engage in something called strategic partnerships, right? Well, what's a strategic partnership? It's a fancy way of saying of people who help each other accomplish more together than they can by themselves, right? Oprah has a funny saying where she says, I don't know if it's funny, it's more insightful, but she says that there's only 6 relationships that resulted in her business success. Now, she probably had to establish a very wide Rolodex of people to be able to get those 6 relationships, but it actually doesn't take a large number of people to bring success to your life, and the wealthy understand this. They also understand that when the proverbial storm clouds come, right, they get out the Rolodex and they start calling everyone that they know that they have strategic partnerships with. How are we going to get out of this problem, right? So those 4 principles, they're not magic. They seem very, very simple, right? But if you do them over time with your money, these principles can actually help you retire, right, with some security in your life. Because if you think about it, you're not repeating the same mistakes that your parents did because they're locking in the advances. You're doing good behavior all the time over the course of your life, and you're engaging other people to help you, so you're not doing everything alone, right? So we sat down and we said, well, how can we emulate the wealthy and what they do, right? Well, number 1 is, well, let's talk about locking in advances. We don't have access to trust funds. We don't have access necessarily to the same sort of what they call human capital that our parents did, meaning some of us may be first generation to go to college, like myself, right? So what do? Well, to make sure that our families don't have to repeat the same work, there's something called level term insurance. Ooh, exciting, insurance, right? It's a simple way of saying is that you rent a bag of money. If you die, you get a bag of money for your kids. Why is this important, right? Well, the reason is that my father, he grew a business, right? He was in construction. And if something would have happened to him, then basically I would have had to repeat everything because he had no money saved. If he would have had life insurance, right, then my family at least could have gone as far as he did. The second thing that we talk about is establishing habits, right? Who here knows what a mutual fund is? All right, some people do. Good. All a mutual fund is that you save a little bit of money over time, and at the end of when you get ready to retire, you're going to have more money than you did if you didn't save anything, right? Well, mutual funds gives normal people access to the stock market and saving basically for the future. Then the third thing is strategic partnerships, or I skipped, I'm sorry. The third thing is leveraging experts, right? You see a big sign on the side of the building that says Primerica, right? Primerica basically is our big uncle. They've been in business for 33 years. They've got $3 billion in capital. And basically what they do is they help bring the services that we need, right? The financial services to that big group of people that Rob was talking about that no one is talking to, right? They help provide financial literacy for us. Because look, all we have to do is treat our money the same way that the wealthy do, and then we don't have to really worry about trying to figure it out ourselves. And there's a company out there that can help us do that. Who here has heard of the Rule 72? Oh, there's insurance and math rules today. Awesome, right? So the Rule of 72 is the rule of money. It says that if you have a block of cash, you want to know how long it's going to take for that money to double, you divide 72 by the interest rate you're getting. Yes, it's a math problem. And that'll tell you how many years it'll take to double. Here's a really easy way to do it. Who here has a savings account? Right? You probably, do you know what your interest rate on your savings account is, Michael? It's probably less than 1%, all right? But let's call it 1%, all right? If you have $10,000 in there, you divide 72 by 1, it's going to take that $10,000 72 years to turn to 20,000. Right? So the banks and insurance companies, they don't build those buildings off of my overdraft fees, because I know I'm the only one that does that, right? Everybody else is perfect with their checkbook, okay? So what they do is they build their money, or they build their buildings off of our financial ignorance, okay? This is why this is important, right? It doesn't seem that great and exciting to talk about life insurance and mutual funds and some company that helps the middle market. Yes, that's all great, right? But we as a group of people, we're trying to get the message out there that we don't settle for financial ignorance. Now look, if we learn the lessons and I just don't care, right? And I say, okay, now I know it's gonna take 72 years for this money to double, that's great. But at least I have the information to make those decisions. And this group of people that's up at the top, they don't care, like Robin was talking about educating us, because they like everything as the way that it is. So the number 4th principle that we talk about is leveraging, or is strategic partnerships. And that's why we're having this talk tonight, right? If you know it or not, for this next 20 minutes or so, you're in a strategic partnership with us because you're forcibly here for some reason and you're being polite and not leaving, okay? And what that means basically is that we're trying to get the message out there that things like 1% savings accounts aren't great, all right? Things like your 23% credit card means that the credit card company is doubling its money off of you every 3 years, right? And if we don't know these things, then we can make those mistakes and we can repeat the mistakes of our parents, and then we live like our parents and we live like our grandparents and nothing ever changes. But with utilizing these 4 principles of the wealthy over a period of time, in 2 to 3 generations, your family can be secure. In 2 to 3 generations, your family can be financially wealthy. I'm having a daughter, and somewhere between tonight and 2.5 weeks, she's arriving in the world, right? If I teach her these principles, and if she has children and she teaches them the principles, my grandchildren and great-grandchildren can be stone cold wealthy, right? That's a big deal. Because if my grandparents would have done this, I would be wealthy right now. Because I would have, from the time that I was 20, been practicing these principles. I wouldn't have cashed out my 401k for $4,000 so I could go to Europe for a month by myself, which seemed like a great idea at the time, right? 20 years ago. Don't do the math. It really hurts my heart for what it would be in the future, because I lost those 20 years, right? So we get excited about this for 2 reasons. One is because we're kind of jerks, where we're like, well, we want to make sure that at least you know, so that if you make the decision 30 years from now, you can't say, wait, I told you so, right? But the second reason is actually, as a group, we don't want to settle for what's happening for ourselves, or most importantly for our community. Because we understand the concept of strategic partnerships, where we can all accomplish more together than we can apart. And so that's why we want to get this information out there. And we want to get it in a way that's accessible and just let people know that this stuff isn't magic, right? So what I'm excited about is that my daughter and my grandkids' lives will be different because of what I was taught, right? So that's exciting for me, because maybe I'll get to have a mantle up there and they'll have a picture of me above the fireplace and say, that guy's the guy that changed the family tree. And I get pumped up about that. If you don't get pumped up about that, I understand, because that's a really long time away. But I'm going to bring a young, great man up here, the great Brent Sears, to talk about perhaps another way that we can talk about a one-generation game. Thanks a lot.
Wait till a little older than I am, so I still get to hump young. Thank you guys for coming. It's funny, as I was sitting in the back of the room, and for some reason the projector just decided to not work tonight. And so we normally, you come back next week, we have a nice slide, projector, presentation, stuff like that. But it also gives a really unique opportunity to have a conversation. And see, I think one of the challenges that we get into is we think that presentations are valuable. They are. The information on the slides are incredibly valuable. But what you've heard is from a couple, from David and Robin and Wade, are some passionate people that were introduced to an idea that has an opportunity to change the way they look at money, the way they look at business, the way they look at what's possible in their future. And so one of the best things that can happen is we get to kind of suspend this stuff. I leaned over to David because he sometimes has done the part that Wade did. And I go, what would you have done? And he goes, man, I'd have killed it, because I wouldn't have had to worry about what the slide said. I could have just been me. And that's a really interesting kind of space, because sometimes when we let go, we have an opportunity to connect. And so tonight, that's really what this is about. Is our goal is to always let go. Is to leverage every tool that we've got, but to be able to connect to one or everybody in this room about why are you here and what are you looking for. You see, Robin talked about, this is about our support system. This is about, we run this meeting every week because it's an opportunity for someone who's seen our opportunity to bring somebody that is either important in their life and says, man, I want you to be clear, or somebody that has an idea, the opportunity to see a little bit more. And for the folks that have been in the business, that repetition is the mother of learning, that there might be something that you get, right, that you only understand when you understand what you know right now. You see, sometimes it's the building blocks where all of a sudden we have these breakthroughs. And I'm a big breakthrough guy, right? I'm one of those where I do something, and then all of a sudden I'll accidentally, purposely, no, it's accidental, do it a little bit different. And I'm like, oh my God, that's awesome. Am I the only one that's ever had that? See, I think like that's me. I'm like, oh my God, that is so great. But the only way I can get to there is because I did it the same way and I went through this process. And we celebrate the progress. And so tonight, my job when I come up here traditionally in my slides is my job is to talk about, right, this concept of being an entrepreneur. Now, in our office and what we're doing is we talk about the fact that financial literacy is key, right? That's really what it is that Wade went through. Is that can we all agree that if we don't understand the rules of the money game, there's a really good chance we're not going to win. Now, none of the concepts you heard tonight are overwhelming. Why didn't they teach it in 3rd grade, in 4th grade, in 5th grade, in 6th grade, in 7th grade? Why was it reinforced? Why aren't there those spaces in place to where none of that is overwhelming? Well, there's a handful of reasons, and some of it is because the system is set up. The other is, both my parents are teachers. Guess what? Most teachers don't know a clue about money. And so who's teaching us, right? The wealthy aren't coming in and saying, hey, here's how this is. Let me volunteer our time. Let me create this environment, right? There's folks that are valuing all of this stuff. And so tonight's not about changing the educational process, which we could spend an entire night on, right? But it's about understanding kind of where we are. So the first phase, Mark, why we do this is we believe financial literacy is important. Right? We think that if there was somebody that sat down and showed us the rules of the game and then gave us a plan to make those rules happen in our life, that could have a fundamental difference in our family and our community. Is that a relatively simple, straightforward concept? Now, here's the beauty. I don't have to be an expert in finance and programs and resources in order to be able to share basic information. Isn't that fun? Right? I don't have to be the expert. I just have to know the experts. That's our business plan. Is we said, look, if we're good at connecting and reaching people because we believe that there's something important, and we can take that information to people, then they can make a difference. See, the reality is the internet has been a game changer. Every tool you ever need, right? If you guys have ever seen Good Will Hunting, right? Everything you ever need to learn could be, like $56 in late charges at the, the library. Like everything you want to learn, you could learn on YouTube or the internet. But it takes, right now, Stanford, Harvard, Yale, all do classes online, master's program classes online for free. You can take them, you can audit them, you can go through the process, you can do the homework, like everything. The resources are there. There's just not a whole bunch of us that are sitting down and putting ourselves through that process because we don't know what to do with it the next place. So part one is we need a facilitator. That's why we're in the financial services industry, right? Right? What he talked about. None of us dream about money. I was just reading an article in Transamerica. Any of us heard of Transamerica? They're being sued right now for a pretty significant thing because for fraudulent sales practices and their insurance premiums inside their universal life policies are going up and people didn't know there's this big lawsuit that's going on and all this other stuff. And I just read about it and I'm like, see, we've been telling that story for a really long time. That doesn't surprise us in the room. Does it surprise you that an insurance company's lying? That's not an overly earth-shattering thing. How about banks? How many of us think banks are they're built to make sure that we get wealthy? Right? There's the next one. Hell no, right? All this other stuff. Right? So here's an interesting thing. How about lenders? Do lenders want us out of debt? No, they stop making money. Isn't it weird? Michael, you and I don't know each other. We spent 35 seconds together, and we've already communicated together in a short room in a short period of time that the banks, the insurance companies, lenders, the three groups all of us are supposed to turn to, none of us trust. And every once in a while someone says, yeah, but Primerica I've heard about. Like, whoa. What are we comparing it to? So we have an opportunity to address the financial services industry because no one's coming. The reason we need to grow is we need good people that can show up in our communities and say, look, the cards are stacked against us, but we can fix it. If we understand the rules, if we understand how to do this, we can make fundamental changes. And that's pretty important. But 50 years is a long time, right? The reality is working at a job for the next 30, 40, 50 years looks like a long time from now, right? The cost of gas is going up, the cost of lunch is going up, the cost of house is going up, the cost of life, everything is going up except the average income. The average income in America is actually $4,000 less today than it was 15 years ago. So how do we offset it? Because I've been in the business 20 years. 20 years ago, when I sat down with someone and said, hey, we need to save and invest, they looked at me and said, I don't have any money. And I'm like, well, we better figure this out because things are going to cost more money. Now, all of a sudden, everything costs more money. We're making less money. What happened to the money they didn't have? Well, how many of us think 10 years from now, gas is going to be a little bit more expensive than it is right now. Cars are going to be a little bit more expensive than they are right now. Cell phones are going to be a little bit more expensive than they are right now, right? All of our expenses are going to increase over the next 10 or 15 years, right or wrong? Is our income, is our opportunities to grow. You see, the second part to tonight is about this concept of this entrepreneurial literacy. See, when I talk to folks, and I ask them, have you ever thought about owning a business? Literally 9 out of 10 say, of course I've thought about owning a business. Right? I'd love to be my own boss. I'd love to do this. I'd love to do this. And if they're not, if they haven't given up complete hope yet, they start to shine and smile. You ever get into one of those conversations where someone starts telling you what they want to accomplish and they're beaming, they're glowing, and they're like, it'll look like this, and I'll do this, and I'll do this. Am I the only one that's ever had those conversations? Aren't those fun conversations to have? Because for a moment, for a brief moment, you're going to get sucked into the experience of somebody else's dream, the experience of what's possible. Doesn't matter where they are in their life. There's just that moment that you get a look through their eyes and go, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. You've had that experience before, right? But then the question becomes, when the conversation's over, or the next phase is, so what's stopping you? Well, traditionally it's, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have the skills, I have too many responsibilities, I don't know how to do it, 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 I don't know how to do it. And by the time we're done with that conversation, that glow is gone. And the reality of obstacles is what's overcome that conversation. Or they're the purely delusional, which I'm okay with, where they're like, F it. We'll figure it out. How many of you know those folks? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's this, let's go at this, yeah, rah, rah. The problem is 80% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years. Why? Because they're lazy entrepreneurs? No. Because they're stupid? No. The reality is, if they don't have the skills, we don't have the skills as an entrepreneur that we need to take care of the front of the house and the back of the house, we ultimately will have to figure out those skills. If we don't have the support system in place, we're going to take on the world alone, which is an incredibly difficult thing. And if we don't have the capital reserves in place, we don't have the money in place, we will not be able to survive the mistakes we're going to learn and be exposed to. The challenge is a lot of people walk in with the front of the house skills and not enough money, but raw energy. And they try to work the raw energy as much as they can to hopefully develop the skills, make enough money to keep their business, their doors open until they get lucky enough to be able to move to the next. And there's a handful that make it, that give all the rest of us to believe, and everyone else that walks away going, shh, I tried, I failed, I'll start over. And the problem is that most of us have this start over mentality. So it's not the, oh my God, look at all the things I've learned. The next time I'm going to be this much better. It's, that was my one shot. It didn't work. I guess I'm only supposed to be fill in the blank. And that's where most of us exist. And so we sat back and said, well, what if we could arm people with the tools and resources to not have to figure out all the skills on your own? If someone showed up and said, hey, these are the skills that you need and here's what they are and here's how you can learn them, could you learn them? If you had that enthusiasm, that glow about you, about what's possible, what you want, if you existed in that space and someone said, you're going to need to know these skills and here's how you learn them. If you took that energy and enthusiasm, could you learn those skills? Like this isn't, but y'all aren't in that space right now. Right? You're all, I don't know where y'all are, but y'all aren't in that space right now. This is, wait a second. You mean if I said, man, here's what I want to accomplish, and someone showed up and said, here's how you can accomplish it, and you lived in the enthusiasm space, could you learn that stuff? Yes. Now, if you learn that stuff, would that give you a stronger belief that things are possible? Now, what if someone sat down with you and said, okay, you need to learn these things, and you need these 30 people in your corner because there's going to be good days and bad days, and if you have a support system, when the bad days are coming, you know where to turn, and when there's good days to come, you know where to turn, and here's how we're going to cultivate and put these people in your corner so you don't have to take on the world alone, ever. And you were in that space, and you saw the relationships and how to cultivate them and develop them. Could you get excited about cultivating and developing those relationships? So now you're excited, you're in this bubble, and you're like, oh my God, here are the skills I need. And here's the path to the relationships I need. Holy shit, this is possible. Now, what if we sat down and said, now look, at the end of the day, you can have the skills and relationships, but if you don't have the capital to keep your doors open, to be honest with you, none of it matters. But there was a game plan that says, look, over the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, here's the capital you're going to need. Here's how you could create it. And here's a passive income game plan where you could gather this up so you could absolutely develop it step by step so you knew that the weight of the world wasn't on your shoulders as you were being creative. So here's the capital you need, and you were in that space. You think you could be excited? See, that's what we are. When we talk about financial literacy, it's about the ability to take folks that have these goals and dreams and say, look, here are the skills you're going to need. Here's the support system you're going to need, and here's the reserves you're going to need. And we have a game plan to teach you how to master each one of those because that's how we're going to close this gap. We're going to close this gap because we've got to raise Main Street entrepreneurs. We got to teach them the skills, the support system, and the capital necessary and give access to it. And we got to do it on a mass scale fast. And so we said, shit, what if we brought these two things together? There's a pretty big problem. There's 70 million of us that are stuck. What if we took an army of entrepreneurs that had that vision, that moment, but they don't have the skills, they don't know what to do. And we said, look, here's what we do. Let's capture that moment. Let's practice everything you got to learn. So you got it dialed in by helping us solve this problem in the short term and give you the tools and resources necessary to go do what you want to do. It allows us to fundamentally shift the way Main Street thinks about their money, financial literacy. It allows our entrepreneurs to learn the steps that they need to really build something, entrepreneurial literacy, and allows us to stand in the gap and say, not on our watch. Because the government's not coming, the banks aren't coming, the insurance companies are coming, and corporate America's not coming, but they don't got to if a group of us say, we need us. That's what we're talking about. That's that opportunity. That's what we get to do. So when you grow, when you told me about your job, right, there's this glow, there's this, oh my gosh, so much is possible now. And it's about tapping into that moment one more time, getting good at getting somebody to that space. And just as the dark starts to close in, because I think about all the things that it's going to take, we get to stick our hands in and go, no. You don't go, look, are there things to learn? Yep, but you're not alone. That's why we believe in strategic partnerships. Oh my God, I never know what to do. Don't worry about it. We're going to lock in the advances. We're going to give the principles necessary. Man, you don't got to figure this stuff out on your own. There's some experts that have been in business 25, 30, 40 years combined that have years and years of success. And they say, here's the absolute, not only, I'm so excited right now. So I was listening to Business Talk Radio, and I'm a big, I love this guy. I'm a dork, right? I'm a hardcore, nerd when it comes to this stuff. I just love, but it's funny, so I was talking to this guy, or I'm not talking to this guy. Not only do I listen, but I kind of feel like I'm talking to him. So I drive my car. I'm like, are you kidding? And I thought, but it's funny, this guy's like a big VC, and he's talking about this, and the guy that was interviewing was talking about, so what are some of the things you've learned? And he's talking about, well, when you're a CEO, it's this lonely thing because you can't go to your board because basically they're your boss, and you can't go to your vice president because you're supposed to give vision. And so really what you need to do is if you could find other peers in your group that have kind of gone through, and he's describing a strategic partnership, and he's clumsy as hell. And I'm sitting here going, man, it would be so nice if they knew the language of you just have to access your strategic partnerships and all. Like in one sentence, 40 minutes of conversations would have been clean. And I'm like, oh my God, you just need this language. And this guy's worth $100 million. He's describing what we do. He knows it, but he has no idea how to articulate it. Well, he can't explain it. His kids get to model it because they see it. But when someone asks him how he does it, he can't tell them. Because all he knows is this is kind of what he does. So when we talk, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this and I'm parked outside and I'm like, you know, one of those, you guys ever do this? Like you're like done, like you're where you're supposed to be, but you don't want to stop listening to whatever it is, right? And there's like people walking in and they're doing this and they're looking at you like you're the weird guy that's still listening to the radio. And I'm like, no, you got, and I'm having a full conversation with the radio. Am I sharing too much now? Because that's what we get to do. That's what you're here to learn. That's why we've got an opportunity to grow. That's our opportunity. When we talk about our allies, it's the opportunity to introduce the fact that all of us have a dream. All of us have something that gets us fired up, that gets us glowing. It's not about letting that go. It's not about having to figure that out on your own. And it's not about saying, oh, that's not realistic. You've got to create something else. The reality is it's going to take skills to make that a reality. It's going to take a support system to make that a reality. And it's going to take capital to make that a reality. What if you surrounded yourself with people that were experts in those three things, that were generalizable? And who knows, maybe you fall in love with this thing and you want to take this to that next level. Fantastic. Maybe you take this information, you go to, fantastic. But it's not a bad way to live your life. To be able to find people, get them to talk until they glow, and then let them know that's what they get to spend their life doing. See, we're in the financial services industry, so we have an opportunity to be compensated like it. It's hard without the presentation to show the financial impact of what we're talking about, and I'm kind of glad we don't. Because in business, and I'll finish with this, right? There are a lot of questions about business. But this is one of my favorite parts of this conversation, Mark. So I'm going to chat. But if you sit down with business, and anyway, like there are 4 questions. There's like 100 questions. But there's 4 that if you can't clear the 4, you shouldn't ask 5th. Right? It's not that the 5th question isn't important, but the 5th question is only important if you've actually cleared the first 4. Y'all with me? What's your market? You could have the greatest product or service in the history of the world. If 9 people in the world can afford it, you don't necessarily have a lucrative business, right? What's your market? Well, in our business, 70 million families make between $25,000 and $250,000. That's a market of essentially everybody. If you had an opportunity to solve a problem for essentially everybody in this country, and you were relatively competent, should you be economically successful? Okay. Now, the second question is, once you decide you've got a market, what's your competition? If you're in the tech business and you're competing with Google, Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft, and they're all doing exactly the same thing, and you sat in your garage and have an idea, like, there's a really good chance they're going to beat you. But if you had a business that solved the problem for 70 million families, and there was literally no one else doing it, do you think you could be successful? Well, do mainstream families turn to the banks, the insurance companies, and the lenders for real wealth advice and the ability to grow freedom? No. There's no one in our space that does what we do. So if you had a business where your market was everyone, your competition was none, should you have an opportunity to be economically successful? Now, the third question is how important is it? If you sell umbrellas in California, you might not be in business a whole lot because it rains like 7 times. See, what is the need for what you're talking about? Well, see, here's the reality. If you live, how important is food in your life? So better have money to buy it. If you die, how important is it that your family can eat? So you better protect it. And if you've got kids that want to eat, you better figure out how to plan so that you can eat all the time. See, whether you like it or not, we need to save and invest in a plan. So if you had a business where the market was everybody, the competition was none, and the need was vital, do you think you could be economically successful? But just like we talked about before, it comes down to capital. See, I don't work for Primerica. They are our strategic partner. They are the financial services background because they love the financial services industry. They've got the tools and resources made for Main Street families, which is fantastic. And they've got $3 billion in cash. And they said, we need growth. And so we need to partner with folks that want to build something. So if you had a business where the market was everybody, the competition was none, the need was vital, and a $3 billion venture capitalist said our checks never bounce, so your opportunity is essentially unlimited, do you think you could be successful? See, that's what tonight's about. If you're inspired and the idea of profit for security or freedom is important, the opportunity to know we're in a business that people desperately need our help and there's no one coming. If you are in a place where you know what that dream looks like, you've had those conversations with people, you've blown about your ideas or other folks, and you've seen the black start to cave in, not because they don't want to work hard, but they don't have access to tools, the ability to change that, or anywhere in between. That's what this is an opportunity to learn the skills, an opportunity to develop the support system, an opportunity to grow the capital, so that you get to accomplish the things that matter to you. And you get to go to bed every night excited about the fact that you're legitimately fighting for greatness in your life. That when you get into a conversation with somebody, you get to be a small or major part in their dream not dying. See, guys, that's what entrepreneur literacy class is. That's what the primary opportunity is about. And for some of you that have been here for a little while, if you didn't know that that's what you were doing, that's exactly what you do. And every once in a while, I have somebody sit in the room and they're like, Brett, I've heard you talk for a bunch of times and I didn't actually know that's what we were doing. So I just want to remind you, it's okay to build from one idea to the next. It's okay to think one way, right? How many, my last little thing, I lied, I said this last thing before, but I'm going to do one last thing because I love this. It's one of my favorite things. How many of you in the room think you're smarter than a tree? Right? Smarter than a tree. Most of us think we're smarter than a tree. I have a question. Have you ever seen a tree grow half as high as possible? Never seen a tree grow as half as high as possible. How about send its root? Have you ever seen a tree send its root half as deep as possible? No, they send it as deep as they possibly can. How about produce half as many leaves as possible? You ever seen a tree go, I don't feel like growing this branch? I've never seen a tree grow half. Have you ever met a person grow half? Have you ever met somebody that said, I could do this and this, but it's just not worth it? Have you ever seen someone who says, oh, I don't know if I can, or that's too scary? Have we ever met people that allow ourselves to be small? See, we all like to think we're smarter than a tree, but nature says, no. Trees, you're going to grow as deep as possible, as high as possible. You got greatness in front of you, and we're going to make sure we put every system in place to pull everything out of you. And as people, we have the dignity of choice. We have the ability to be big or small. We have the ability to accomplish or not. We have the ability to rationalize away, explain away, or fight for greatness. We have that ability to glow or sink. What happens if you surround yourself with people on a mission of helping people glow, helping them accomplish what they want to accomplish, and help them proud of every step of the way along the way? That's what tonight's about. So guys, thank you for coming. Welcome. Thank you for being a part of this. If there's any questions, it's hard without some of the specifics. Get together with the person who brought you. There's a lot of details into what's going on. But our job is looking for entrepreneurs. We want to raise and develop the strongest cohort of people that want to do something great. We're going to introduce this idea to as many people as possible and support them every step of the way. Whether it's an extra $500 a month, $500 a year, $500 a day, there's an opportunity to change people's lives and to build the solutions for them and their family. So guys, thank you for coming. Have a great night. Thanks.
Yeah.